let's look at the human body. Right? The human body we see is composed of mostly water. Right? Water, in other words, is H2O. So it's this component here that's in blue, and this component here, which is in green. So roughly about 70% of our body is water, right? We are starting off this general biology course with understanding chemistry. And you're probably thinking, well, why do I need to know chemistry, right? That's because in order to understand our entire body, our macroscopic portion, we have to understand the microscopic portion. Just like medications and drugs that you're going to use, you need to know it at a micro level. You cannot just hand it to a patient and say it's magic, right? If we look at the water molecule right over here, H2O, you have 2 hydrogens and 1 oxygen, right? If we go even more basic than that, we notice that one of these oxygen elements, right, this element of oxygen can be broken down into something pretty much fundamental, right? And you're going to hear these terms interchangeably used, elements and atoms, right? For our purposes, for now, you can think of elements as atoms. Atoms are really the fundamental unit of matter. If we look at an atom, right, an atom of oxygen, for example, there are subatomic particles within the atom, right? And there are 3 subatomic particles I want us to focus on. There are protons and neutrons, which make up the control center, the center of an atom, right, called the nucleus. So the center of an atom is called the nucleus, right? And there are 3 subatomic particles. And let me just write subatomic, right? There are your neutrons. Right. Your protons and your electrons. And if you think about the charge on them, the name tells you a lot about the charge. Neutrons are neutral. So if your friend is neutral, he or she is not taking any sides, right? So that's a 0 charge. Protons, right? Protons are positively charged. And electrons are negatively charged. You do need to know this. What do you think electricity is made of? Well, see the word electrons? Electricity, electrons, well, those are just electrons. You're going to learn, if you've taken physics at some point, electrons and current are pretty much identical. I don't want to get too deep into that, right? Now let's look at an example of our element oxygen, or atom of oxygen, right? The oxygen atom has the protons and the neutrons, right? And they are part of the nucleus. Right? Actually, let me use a different color. Let me actually highlight it a different color so it's nicely coded for you. Right? Protons and neutrons, they are part of the nucleus. And the electrons are rotating. They're all on the outside, on the ring structure, right? Where do you think most of the electron mass is made up, right? Well, it turns out the majority of the mass of oxygen, or any atom, is in the nucleus. Right over here. Right. So the majority of the mass, we'll call the atomic mass, is adding the number of protons plus the number of neutrons, and that will become 16. Now let's talk about units, right? There is going to be a little math involved, and it's very basic at this point. 1 proton is measured in general in something called 1 atomic mass units. 1 neutron is also equal to 1 atomic mass unit. Right? So again, if you have 16, right, protons plus neutrons, then you have 16 atomic mass units. You can also call them AMUs. Right? And let's see how we can figure this out from the periodic table of elements. You will get this on your exam. You do not need to memorize this, but let's look for oxygen right over here. And if you look at oxygen, right, on the periodic table, you will see that the number without the decimal is typically the atomic number. It's also the number of protons in the element. So the number of protons in an element will always define the atomic number, which will of course define the element. In other words, nitrogen will always have 7 protons. Oxygen will always have 8 protons. Fluorine will always have 9 protons. Right? That's a set rule. The neutrons can be slightly different, and we're going to talk about more of this in the next video.